We want to welcome you here. We have a number of people that this is your first time, and we want to welcome you here. We're glad this is a bigger group than we're used to having, so we're excited that you're here. My name's Mark Sheffield, and I'm in charge of the Emerging Business Group here at Abbott Stringman Lynch. And so we define emerging businesses as startup and ramp-up companies. You know, the first two phases of the five-phase life cycle of a business. You know, that first two phases is what we would call the emerging business part of it. And so we hold these monthly seminars, and we bring in subject matter experts to help emerging businesses be successful. And we're all about simplicity and plainness. You know, these seminars, you know, you can't go through the whole thing in an hour. So we ask our speakers to boil it down and make it practical and useful and understandable. And so we look for speakers that can do that and that have topics that will be of interest to help you succeed. And everybody has a dream and everybody wants to be successful in their business, and we want to help you do that. So we're real excited. I'm excited about introducing our speakers today. And I had actually had lunch with David and with Jay, and they were kind of talking about their ideas, and I said, you know, this is what we're looking for. We need this kind of information that is boiled down and synthesized, and so it can be put into practice immediately. That's what we want to do, because there's information overload, right, on the internet, and you just go, you feel like you're bombarded with it. And so that's what we're trying to do. So, you know, these two guys are going to be speaking, you know, together. David will go first. But David Belgum, you know, he's a local guy, grew up here, went to San Jose State, has a degree in accounting, and then he got his master's degree from Santa Clara. And so he's worked in accounting and finance for over 15 years, and for the last 5 years he's been the CFO of Prozyme, which is a biotech company here in the Valley. So really sharp guy, and you know, has studied a lot about business valuations, and he's got some concepts here that I think will be really useful to you. Jay Fife has been attending some of our courses for the last year, and he has got over 30 years of business in startups, but also big companies. And so he's learned a lot about what works in big companies, and he's taken some of those concepts and said, well, how can we, you know, put that into work in a small business, a startup. And so for the last 5 years, he's kind of transitioned and taken that knowledge from learning from running big companies to small startup enterprises. And in fact, he's got his own new startup now called Fuse Phase, and he's the CEO and the president of it, and it's providing accounting and other specialty services, you know, for startups. So we'll turn the time over to David and Jay at this point, and glad to have you here. You know the routine. It's okay to eat while they're talking, and we'll let it going.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, let's give them a welcome.
Well, thank you. There's been great speakers in the past, and so we feel privileged to be on the list to be able to share. And so I wanted to thank Abbott, Stringman & Lynch and Mark for giving us this opportunity to share these ideas. So today we're going to talk about what business value is, how it's created, and also look at what business value might look like over the three phases of a viable business. So these four companies here are icons in the Valley, and what they're really known for is being able to create value. And really, you could say that they are masters at creating value. Cisco is worth $120 billion in their market cap. That's what the stock market says that they're worth. Intel is worth $129 billion. Google is worth $374 billion. And Apple is worth $500 billion. So clearly, they're good at creating value. Right. So the question is, what is it that makes them so special? And what is it that gives them this extraordinary value? Well, I want to call it the secret sauce. And there's probably people in the room that have ideas of what the secret sauce is and know more about the companies than we do. So what Jay's going to do is write down your responses. And so what are some ideas? Just raise your hand and offer some ideas on what you think the secret sauce is for these individual companies.
You want our responses?
We want you, yeah, I'd like your response. Yes.
Apple's stake in life is the ability to see technology and adapt it to average people.
Okay.
So average people can use technology that they spot that has usefulness at the consumer level.
Okay, good. Other responses? Yes.
They move faster than their competitors.
Apple does.
All
All of them. Okay, well, let's think about individual secret sauce. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, I for the one on Apple, Tim Cook said this morning in his news conference, they make incredibly engaging user experience, incredibly engaging user experiences. That's what they do. That's their secret sauce.
Okay, good. And so that's kind of related to what we said earlier. Yes.
On that same note, for example, Apple, compared to any of the other computer companies, they actually tell a story. They engage people. They have a fan base,
Okay.
but their business is about a story that people can relate with.
Connected. Okay, good. What about the other three? Yes.
So for Google, maybe creating a product that is the best that it's ever done, that didn't exist prior to it.
Okay.
So
Like-
whereas the search engine, no one really had a search engine because search engine wasn't necessarily part of our vocabulary 10 years prior.
Yeah. Or Apple Glass, or the driverless car. Yeah. What other ideas on secret sauce for these companies? Yeah.
Well, certainly Google has an extremely good search engine capability. I don't know its ability to search the internet. They have algorithms that they just keep refining and refining way ahead of everybody else.
Right.
That's what's kept them ahead of everyone else. Me, anyway. These other things are sidelines, maybe. That's their business.
It's just their name.
Their name. Okay, so they're recognized.
I mean, just it's different. Like, it's Google.
Okay.
When it first came out, everybody was like, Google, it's Google. So now it's Google everything.
Yeah. Okay.
zeros.
Yes.
I think all four of them have the ability to attract the talent that they need. So they've done something, I'm not exactly sure what is, maybe that's part of the secret sauce, that gets, the top talent to try and make changes.
What about Intel and Cisco? Any thoughts on those two companies?
Intel is very vertically integrated.
Okay.
It's one of their secret sauces.
Okay. What about Cisco? Any Cisco aficionados?
You got an engineer from Cisco right here.
Oh.
Tell us.
No pressure there.
Okay. Well, I know Cisco's known for acquisitions, and that's a hard thing to do. So maybe could be their ability to do acquisitions.
So they have relationships with people running the largest networks in the world, so that gives them a unique perspective on the business problems for them.
Okay.
They're really a player in the business space, I would consider.
Okay. So relationships.
I'd say insights into very large networks.
Okay. Good. Okay. So those are great responses. One thing I'd like to differentiate or think about with the responses is that with some of them, I'm trying to think here. Okay, so name recognition, for example. In some industries, you have to have name recognition in order to be successful. So that's a requirement. And so I'm just drawing a subtle distinction here that some things are critical to be successful, but then there's the secret sauce which makes you really stand out and shine in relation to your competitors. And so that's what I mean by secret sauce, is the thing that gives it the leading edge in the industry. Okay, so today what we're going to be talking about is how you can create a valuable company and how you can identify what your secret sauce is for your company. You can become masterful at creating value. So imagine with me for a moment, if the company that you're working with, if you could create, I don't know, 1/1000th of the value of any of these companies. Okay, I'm sorry. The value would be somewhere between 120 million and $500 million. Wouldn't that be amazing? Or even if it was 1/10,000th, if that number seems too big. 1/10,000th of the value of these companies, your company would be valued at between 12 million and 50 million. And so for a lot of us in this room, that would be a home run. Imagine what that would mean to your customers and to your employees and to your investors. Or what would it mean to you personally and your friends and family if you created something of true value? What would it mean for changing the world? As in Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation changing the world. Wouldn't that be great? Well, right now, you might be feeling some internal dissonance. A little voice in your head saying, what planet is this coming from? You know, talking about those kind of numbers. So let's do a reality check. In 2008, I was working as a CFO of an IT services company. And the company was really starting to get some great traction on selling the products and services. And then the financial meltdown happened. And all of a sudden, the sales just completely dried up without any warning at all. And so the company went into free fall. And it took a couple years to work its way back to profitability. So the reality is that it's really tough to start a company and to build value. And so, you know, we realize that, you know, there's obstacles that you face. For example, the market that just didn't show up. You thought it was there, but it wasn't. Or the competition that's trying to eat your lunch. Financial capital that costs 20% per week. Human capital that isn't really as smart as you thought it was. And what about those phone calls? People aren't calling you back. And then there's risks. You have strategic risk, where you're not really sure if it's going to work out. Operational risk, you know, things are starting to fall apart. Technology that's being leapfrogged. The IRS is going to audit your books in a week. And then there's the payroll that you can't meet because you're running out of cash. Yes?
You skipped one item on the obstacle side called credibility. Can you define that and tell me how you develop credibility?
Credibility is people taking you seriously.
Do they believe you?
Yeah. Do they think you can do what you say you're going to do?
How do you create that?
Through history of delivering results, I think.
But what if you're a startup and you haven't delivered anything yet?
Well, that's the tough part, yeah. It's a chicken and egg. All right, so businesses, just like products, businesses have a life cycle. They go through an evolution. There's a startup phase, and I'll call that the ordinary world. Nothing really earth-shattering has happened. There's the ramp-up or growth phase, the mature phase, and the decline. And so in the startup phase, you're looking for that elusive hockey stick, right? Trying to get the sales to grow. I worked for a company that made pogo sticks. Well, it wasn't really pogo sticks, but it was like a pogo stick. And the founder started this company on the premise that he wanted to make a safer pogo stick. And so he and his family lived off their mortgage, and off credit cards for about 2 or 3 years as he worked on developing the technology and patenting it. And so I came in kind of when they were starting to get some sales. And the reason why he did that is because there was a little girl who was on a pogo stick in his backyard and had a bad pogo stick accident. And he knew there was a way to make safe pogo sticks. And that's why he was so extremely motivated and willing to take risks. And so I got to witness the company go from very little value to actually quite a bit of value. And it was a neat thing to watch. In the ramp up stage, you're really trying to hold things together. It's really a time when you are lacking the operational resources that you need, and it can be quite exciting but also stressful. When you reach maturity, your sales have leveled off, or maybe are even in decline, and quite often, it's hard to recognize that you've hit that point. Sometimes there's a certain amount of denial going on that the company isn't growing anymore. Jack Welch, you've all heard of, and he was considered a great business manager. In fact, in 1999, Fortune magazine selected him as the manager of the century. But anyhow, he was the CEO of GE for 20 years in the 80s and 90s. And when he first started, he came to San Jose and met with the management team at the nuclear plant division and to hear what their plans were for next year. And so he sat down with them, and they were going through a presentation and saying how they were going to get 3 orders for new power plants next year. And which seemed reasonable because because they'd been getting 3 to 4 orders since the 1970s, and so they're just kind of extrapolating that. Well, this was 1981, and 3 Mile Island happened in 1979. There hadn't been a new order for a power plant since 3 Mile Island. So midway through the presentation, Jack dropped a bombshell on him and said, "Guys, I don't think you're going to get 3 orders. In fact, I don't think you'll ever get another order in the United States for a nuclear power plant. If I were you, I would think about how you can change the business model from delivering nuclear power plants to delivering fuel and servicing the 72 power plants that you already have installed." Well, these guys objected, and they said, "Oh, we can't do that. That's going to destroy morale, and it's going to be a mess." But Jack said, "You got to do it." And so they made the change, and in 2 years they went from $14 million in profitability to $116 million. So, and I don't think there's, to my knowledge, there hasn't been an order yet for a power plant. So, I think Jack was pretty smart.
What about other places in the world, though?
Yeah, other places. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there are.
Think of worldwide view.
So the challenge that one has when they've reached maturity is threefold. One is to recognize that you've hit that spot. Secondly, to figure out how are you going to change your business to get to the next level. And thirdly, how are you going to get your management team on board? But but if you can, this is kind of what it can look like, transforming your business from one level to the next and then to the next. And really, that's the story of Silicon Valley. If you look at any successful startup, they've really morphed from one type of business to the next to the next. It's almost never a straight line to success. So instead of business evolution, we're going to call this business transformation. So that's one thing one concept to think about as you think about how to create value. Okay, well there's different ways to think about value, and for example, There were the two guys from, what's it called? Snapchat, I guess? And they, Facebook wanted to buy Snapchat for $3 billion, and they decided that it wasn't enough money. I don't know how they thought about value, but apparently they had something in their minds that said it's worth more than $3 billion.
3.1.
Yeah. So I'm not going to talk about that kind of value because I don't know what to make of it. But so we'll talk about two different tales of value. The first tale is by the accountants. And so what they do is they take the balance sheet, add up all the assets, subtract the liabilities, and you get net book value, or equity as we like to call it. Now, accountants, or companies rather, spend hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of dollars a year to get these numbers right. There's an army of accountants and auditors and people doing SOX and all kinds of stuff. So certainly this number must be pretty accurate and must reflect what the true value of the company is, right?
Wrong.
Okay. Well, there's another tale of value, and that's by the investors. And so that is, you guys know this, multiplying the shares outstanding times the stock price to give you the market cap or market value. And so the interesting thing here is that
Never the two shall meet.
never the two shall meet. And also, the value can actually be lower than what the balance sheet says. So it can be higher or lower. Well, for our story, we're going to just talk about the higher value because that's more interesting. So when you compare the two, the difference is $2,000. So why might that be? Well, accountants are trained to be conservative. And so they will expense a lot of things which they wouldn't spend money on if it didn't have some kind of future value. So things like R&D, a quality system, executive recruitment fee, patent filings, strategic relationships, payments to the political action committee, and the president's lease Ferrari. Well, maybe the last one doesn't add value, but you get the idea. And so quite often the market value is going to be higher than the book value. Well, let's go back to our four companies. If you take market value and subtract your net book value, you get what I'm calling intangible assets. Accountants will quibble over that, but for our purposes, we'll just call them intangible assets, right? And so in the case of Intel, the blue or the green bar represents the amount of market value that is represented by the intangible assets, and the blue represents the net book value for the company. So Intel, 65% of their market value is these intangible assets, or $84 billion. So we'll call that created value that they've created. In the case of Apple, that percentage is a little bit higher, 73%. In the case of Google, it's 75%. I'm sorry, Cisco, and then in the case of Google, it's 78%. So you can see that there's tremendous value that they've created. It's the premium that the market has assigned to the company. So on average, with those companies, about 75% of their market value is represented by intangible assets that aren't reported on the balance sheet. So these are things like a skilled workforce, know-how, trade secrets, patents, a quality system, data, distribution channels, strategic partners, and brand awareness.
David, part of that is that when the market is valuing the value of those intangible assets at some future point in time, where the accountants are now looking at, well, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
Or today? Is that characterization of why that big difference there is?
Partly. what you said about a future point in time is partly correct insofar as the market is saying, based on its future expected cash flow or earnings, this is what we think it's worth. So there is it's forward-looking, whereas the accountants are more historical. Yeah. So these things are just examples of the ingredients that go into their secret sauce. Yeah.
Is the creation of intangible assets different between a startup and someone who is in the growth phase rather than the startup phase? Is there a difference in the amount of the intangible assets?
Well, I would think that the potential for creating more intangible assets is greater in the growth phase simply because there's more resources that are being applied to the company. But not necessarily. I mean, it could be that someone has worked, for example, pharmaceutical companies, their value really is created before they start to get revenue. Because they have to go through the drug trials and develop the patents and so forth. Yes?
What are you referring to there as data in the secret sauce?
Data would be, for example, credit card companies like a Visa. They have data on people's creditworthiness. And so that allows them to know who's a good risk and who isn't a good risk for issuing a credit card. And so that would be one example. All right, so these things, are ingredients to secret sauce, and because they have the ability to create so much value, we're now going to call these strategic assets for the rest of the presentation. All right, let's look at financial drivers for value. When I prepare a formal valuation of a business, a lot of times I always try and turn to discounted cash flow as a tool for coming up with value. And the formula that you see on the screen is really just a simplified version of discounted cash flow. And you'll notice that there are three elements to that formula. As it turns out that as you vary any of those elements, it's going to change the value of the company. So for example, when you increase revenue, the value of the company is going to go up. When you improve earnings, the value of the company is going to go up. And when you reduce the risks, the value of the company is going to go up. This all seems kind of intuitive and not really earth-shattering. And so I want you to kind of hold these three value drivers in your mind, though, as things that will change the value of a company. The other thing I'd like to mention is that this formula, don't do it at home, because you're not going to come up with a value that's meaningful for a company. So valuing a company is much more complex than just running it through this formula, but it's a good way to understand the concepts at least. All right. So another way of looking at this is that...
Question behind me?
Yes,
I had a question.
Yeah.
What variables go into level of risk? It just seems like that'd be really hard to assess for a early stage startup company.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you could sort of...
Well, in the case of this, this is a very narrow definition of risk, and it's really the cost of capital. So what I mean by that is it would be what your lenders are going to lend the money to you for, and also the expectation that your equity investors have for their return on investment. And so it's a combination of those two is your risk.
Thank you.
So less risky, lower cost of capital.
But
Yeah.
how do you translate that into a number? Are you just saying that's a concept? It's not an actual formula, or
No,
It actually-
it's a number. So if the bank will lend you a line of credit at 10%,
Yes.
and if your equity investors have run their model and based on that, they expect a 30% return, and let's say it's 50% debt, 50% equity, then the blending of those two is 20%. So it is a number that goes into the formula. It's an average of the two. Yeah. Good question. So another way of looking at these is that if you change the trajectory of your revenues over several years by increasing the slope of the line, that's going to improve your world because your value is going to be higher. The same thing with profit margins and cash flow. The more cash flow you can generate, you're going to have a higher value. And lastly, the better you're able to manage your risks, given the market opportunity, the more valuable your company is going to be. And so when you put all these things together and you manage them in concert, then we have what we're calling a value triangle, where you have profits and growth representing sides of the triangle, and then the base is the risk. And so as you enlarge any of these three variables, then the area inside the triangle value increases at a higher rate than the increase in the sides. Let me illustrate what I mean by that. By improving these three variables, you can have a multiplier effect on value. So under scenario A, can you read this, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if it was too small. Under scenario A, for the three variables, for revenue growth rate, we have 5%, profits 750, and the risk is 20%. So you plug those into the formula and you get a value of 5,000. Okay? And if you were to increase or improve, let's say, these variables by 20%, then you have scenario B. So you increase your revenue growth rate 20% from 5% to 6%. You increase your profits to 900, and you improve your risk by 20%, which means you lower that percentage to 16%. Then your value goes up to 9,000. So in doing that, you can see that by changing the variables in concert by 20%, you get an 80% improvement in your value. So again, I want to hasten to add that it's not that simple, but I'm just illustrating a concept that there is a multiplier effect. Yes?
I like the 16% risk because it's reduced.
Uh-huh.
Can you elaborate a little bit more how it's going to go from 20 to 16?
Sure. Well, let's say that you're wanting to borrow money from a bank, and they say, your books aren't audited, and so so you say, well, what do we need to do to get this loan? Or let's say,
Or a line of credit.
Yeah, line of credit. Okay, they're going to lend it to you for 15% line of credit, right, per year. And they say, but if you got an audit from Abbott, Stringham, and Lynch, your risk profile would improve, and we could lend this to you for 10%. That's how you can do it. That's one example.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to reduce the risk of loss that way.
Yeah, because the bank can count on your numbers as being reviewed by an independent third party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about this. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Jay, who's going to talk specifically about risk, which is something that is probably the least looked at area of businesses, and in particular startups.
So, like I said, what we want to do is we looked at the triangle. I want to take it now and focus now a little bit more on risk and examine ways to mitigate or manage risks in the different phases of your business and also on some overarching initiatives. And so if we look at what risk is, I mean, Webster's would define risk as exposure to the chance of loss or injury, a hazardous or dangerous chance. It's just not worth the risk. But again, when you're reducing risk from a business perspective, it really comes down to having the right information to be able to make the right decisions. So in many ways, reducing risk is about information. And reduced risk adds value to your organization by increasing the probability of success. Thank you. So one of the ways, the overarching ways, regardless of what cycle you are and where you are and where your business is at, one way to reduce risk is by managing cash flow. Initially, that starts with your cash forecasting. Worked for a company for a number of years, and I went back and added up the months, and basically 56% of the time I was there, we were operating on a month-to-month basis. And about 4 years into the engagement, or 4 months into the engagement, ended up had our first cash call. So I became sort of infinitely knowledgeable about the definition of the shoals of bankruptcy. So really what the cash forecasting model that we put together was not only about our survival, but it was about building something for the future. So I've left the company, but I'm still affiliated with it. And what's been interesting is they've been able to grow. In the last couple of years, they've been in the black, and even last year, their revenue grew at about 140%. So the idea is what you create today can add value tomorrow. Yes?
Please speak a little louder. It's hard to hear back there.
Yeah, I'm a soft talker. Sorry. Yeah. So if it gets bad, just raise your hand and I'll start to yell. The next phase is really in understanding the cash forecasting model is having some visibility, understanding into your expense run rate. It's really about understanding where your money's spent and understanding and having some visibility into those extraordinary expenses that occur, and so you're being able to react to that and manage your cash flow that way. I had a concept of confirmed revenue, and in managing forecasting revenue, we started to break down our revenue between confirmed and unconfirmed. And the definition of confirmed revenue really is revenue that's contractually obligated. There's a historical precedent to it. You know, it could be your renewal rate on your maintenance, but it's the idea of understanding what that number is. Worked for a company, in the year we had our revenue target was $35 million. And we're sitting around the table and go, well, where the heck is that going to come from? So we sat down and we took our revenue and we broke it down, and we dug into the revenue, and what we determined of that $35 million, 68% of it was confirmed. So at the same time, all we were focused on as we went through the year, is how we were going to come up with that additional 30-odd%. So it allowed us to focus our resources and our time and our energy on what we needed to do to be able to drive that money to be able to hit the number. And ultimately, we were successful that year in doing it. Recently worked for a company, our confirmed revenue was about 82 to 85%. The benefit of that was in terms of when we went out for a line of credit, we were able to demonstrate that to the bank, and that was another way to reduce our risk. But at the same time, what it allowed us to do was focus on driving new business to attain our goal, to manage the business. But at the same time, it illustrated that where we were at, what was critical was customer retention. So we were able to focus our resources on trying to maintain that 82 to 85% by focusing on the needs of the customers. Though our ability to understand our revenue streams was allowed us to be able to do that. Finally, if we look at ways to drive cash to the balance sheet, one of the methods to do that now is electronic bill payment and invoicing and collections. The idea is to be able to reduce your DSO, which is basically days sales outstanding. That's moving cash quicker onto your balance sheet. So there's a number of programs out there. Bill.com is one of them. Added to that, they have a very robust cash flow management calendar. Zencash, FreshBooks, all of those things that allow you to push out invoices electronically to customers usually electronic collection aspect of it, and to accelerate cash back into your business. So as we talked about the different phases of your organization, started to look at and where can we manage risk in the different phases of our company's development. So if we look at it for managing risk during the startup phase, certain areas that we can look at. So if we start and focus on some of those startup risks, I had this concept of errors of omission versus errors of commission. Now basically the definition of error of commission is you tried something and it didn't work, which in the startup phase is not necessarily a bad thing as the idea is going out. Trying new things, what works, adjusting, pivoting, making changes, but learning from those mistakes. Now, the definition of an error of commission is really just an opportunity lost. It's something that was out there that you didn't take advantage of. So I had recently started off, and I'm out selling now, and I don't have a tremendous amount of experience in selling. Guys in the back office don't. So recognizing that I had that need, I brought in a business development guy to accelerate my learning curve. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So that was my error of commission. Recognized that I needed to accelerate my learning in terms of learning how to sell, just brought in the wrong guy. So was able to solve that problem, and I learned from it. But again, had I not recognized that error of omission would have been not recognizing that lack of experience on my part and not addressing it. Again, as you're working out of the startup realm, develop your market, a niche, and your differentiation. The idea is continually ask the question, what's our market? Where are we selling? What's working? What's not? What's resonating? Go out and continue to examine what that is, continue to learn from it, continue to build off it, and build that differentiation. Make yourself separate from everybody else. And again, as you're starting off, the problem is there's a lack of processes or systems. I mean, that's inherent in starting a business. The problem you have is the learning curve it takes to learn how to build those processes, to be able to scale your business. It takes time, it takes energy. You have to, and it always takes longer than you think you do. But building those processes within your organization, those are the kind of things that are going to help you reduce risk. Again, as you sort of move on the life cycle of your business out of the startup realm into the ramp-up realm, risk changes as well. The things that are important, things that drive risk change at different levels of your business organization. So if you think about it, what are some of the areas that there's risk in ramp-up? One of those is ongoing strategic planning. The idea is you started your business with a business plan. And really what strategic plan, can you hear? Am I too not loud enough? Yeah. So the idea of, I must not be. So.
Can you turn the volume up on your speaker?
I'm new at this. No, that's it. Yeah. So I'll just have to turn it up internally. So the idea is in taking that business plan and making it into a living document. And really what the strategic plan is, it starts with your product development. It analyzes your competitors. It analyzes the marketplace. And the idea is to take that document and allow you to continue to look at your business from a strategic perspective and allow you to leverage that for growth. So again, it becomes an ongoing document. As you're ramping up, again, it's really about delegation and employee development. Had a situation where working for a company and our largest partner exited with no notice. So we had to extricate ourselves from this relationship. We had to bring in an incumbent. So basically what we did is we brought everybody, all the different departments around the table and said, we've got to solve this problem. We've got to exit from this relationship. And what was interesting when we did it is you bring the operations people have a different perspective from the sales people, and the finance people have a different perspective from the marketing people, and there's a difference. The systems development looks at things differently. And you bring all of these people around the table and you ask them to solve a problem, and you basically give them the tools to do that. And we gave them the tools to do that. and we empowered them to make that change. And what's really fascinating is when we were able to do that, it created this amazing energy and forward momentum by everybody bringing their different perspective to the table and working together to solve a problem. So ultimately, we were able to successfully, in a very short period of time, extract ourselves from that relationship. At the same time, to be able to bring in the incumbent and move the business forward. So we wouldn't have been able to do that without delegating and developing those employees. So back again in systems and infrastructure development. Similar to employee development is building that structure to leverage for growth, to create the economies of scale to grow your business. But having those systems in place allows you to sort of continue to move the company forward and continue to grow. So one of the things that I noticed as I launched this thing is the idea of taking care of yourself. I wear a lot of different hats. I get pulled in a lot of different directions. And what I found is having a peer group, peers or contemporaries that I can talk to and exchange ideas with, exchange experiences with, has been extremely helpful. I've learned a tremendous amount from it. And so I was a CFO for a company, and the CEO is a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And what the EO did was start a group for second in commands. So basically, on a monthly basis for 4 hours, I was able to spend time around the table in a confidential environment with a group of CFOs and CEOs and just experience share. And what was amazing is I found out is that the problems that I had and what I was going through and the things that I had to deal with were basically the same things they had to deal with. There's a lot of commonalities in what we had to worry about and what we had to focus on. So again, having somebody that I could talk to in terms of that was extremely helpful, and in many ways cathartic. I put some lists on here. There's a lot of other things, a lot of other organizations that are out there. These are just some of them. The Entrepreneurs Organization. Sean Murphy puts together a Bootstrappers Breakfast. I've been doing that for about 8 months. We meet in San Francisco once a month. I know they're Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and Palo Alto. But it's the idea of a group of entrepreneurs that basically sit around the table and we talk about what we do and what problems we're having. And it's the idea of, again, sort of talking through and how we can help each other. It's the kind of thing that's been extremely helpful for me in learning and gaining new knowledge. So I think we're back up.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of summarize some of the ideas that I shared, and then Jay will do likewise. So we talked about that there's two worlds that you can be in, an ordinary world and an improved world. And you want to get to that improved world by creating a really valuable business. And so you do that, you start that by figuring out what your assets are and what they really need to be for your business, strategic assets. And so on the left side, the blue water represents a certain level of strategic assets where there's just a few of them. And so that can be distribution channels, know-how, skilled workforce, but it's a limited set of strategic assets. And as a result, it will drive a certain level of profits and growth and risk profile, which in turn will result in a certain level of value. In the improved world, you're going to have many strategic assets that you've developed. And so those are some things like patents and trademarks and know-how, data. And so those things are going to in turn drive a higher level of profits and growth and more manageable risk. And so the resulting value, you can see, is greater. So just wanted to give you that picture as a way of kind of tying the two concepts together of strategic assets and then the financial value drivers, which in turn result in value. And then
So,
John,
so question.
Yes.
So, I just want to make sure I'm getting this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, intuitively, we can all sort of imagine that if you have more sales, you're increasing value, you know, and also profits, because just because you have sales, if you're not making any money and you don't have any margin on it, it's not going to be real valuable, right? But if you've got profits and sales, you know, we can all just picture, okay, that's going to be more valuable, right?
Sure.
But I think what you're adding is this element of risk, and you can say, well, but there's all these other things, you know, that Jay talked about, that can also add value, because now maybe an investor says, gee, I don't need a 50% return. You know, if risk is the cost of capital, you know, I'm willing to lend enough so I can get a 20% return, or even a 15% return. And if you do that with all the other stuff, the partnerships and the skilled workforce and the distribution, all these other things that you're doing, then that can add value as well. And that's kind of what you're saying is, you know, reducing the risk adds value, if as much, or in some cases as more, maybe, depends, then profits and growth.
Well, yeah, and each one of these can drive a different financial driver. So, for example, customer relationships will probably drive top-level growth, whereas know-how may drive profitability because you're more efficient operationally. And patents may lower risk because it's a barrier to competitors. And so there's less risk from competitors coming in and taking market share. So each one of these things can have a different effect on a financial driver.
I have a question for you. One thing that's not on here is like planning, in the sense that, you know, there's a difference of working on your business and working in your business, obviously. And, you know, there's companies out there, look at the Sears of the world, that they were huge at one point, and now that they got shut out by all these other companies that are out there. And you could be doing really, really well, but if you're not planning 5-10 years ahead, or you have a futurist like Intel does, you're not looking at the bigger picture here. You can do all this stuff, and somebody's just going to come out of the woodworks and just kill you, basically. Right. Any thoughts on that? Where, I mean, it's planning, I guess, it's not on there in terms of improvement.
Well, that's true, and that would fall into the category of risk reduction, and that was something that Jay was talking about. You know, making that business plan a living document. So, yeah, yes.
If you're a startup, as opposed to a company that is in business of revenue and profit, how do you communicate to finance organizations your value? What are the things that are on the right-hand side over there that communicate more value for a startup?
Well, I think that oftentimes people looking at evaluating the value of a startup are most interested in market opportunity, the size of the market, and the growth rate of the market. So it's probably your biggest ability to communicate that value is through customer validation. Getting sales or getting people to put down money.
They're not in sales.
Okay, they're not in sales.
That's why I say they're a startup. So how do you communicate value when you're at that stage?
Well, I think it would still come down to market validation. And so it mean, yeah, Sean.
So he's got skilled workforce. I think if you can say the team has got a track record in addressing similar problems, that's a plus.
Yeah, and I think it's also part about starting to lay that groundwork and build that foundation. I mean, at some point you have to start to build those strategic assets. And it's the point in time when you start to think about building those, looking for those opportunities to create those, start to build those assets at the startup phase. That's going to allow you to, as you ramp up, as you hit ramp up maturity, and start to look for an exit, you're going to start to build on those. It's starting earlier rather than later.
What about strategic partnerships and customer relationships that you're developing rather than that you have?
But again, that's part of that process. That's part of brand awareness,
Right.
customer relationships, strategic partnerships. All of those enter into it. It's building who you are and that entity.
Yeah, I think if an investor is looking at the company and they're saying, gee, there's less risk now because of the people here. They're developing credibility, they've got strategic partnerships, they've got a board that knows what they're doing. Hey, I believe in these people.
Right.
That reduces risk in the investor's mind and adds value to the company.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, Sean, why don't you,
Sure.
or Jay rather. Sorry.
Him too. So what we wanted to do is, we've talked about building these strategic assets and building the balance sheet, building strategic assets. What we wanted to do is take it down to a little bit more of a tactical level. And the idea is to create some fuel for thought. What can you as business owners do to create value in 2014? What are some of the tactical things that you can do? And what I did is I broke it down into between the startup phase and ramp-up phase, because again, we talked about risk and how that evolves over the life cycle of your business, and ramp-up and maturity, and I'm going to run through this quickly. We talked about electronic invoicing and bill payment as an initiative in this year to be able to reduce your DSO to get money on your balance sheet quicker. The idea of specialists. There are people that you can bring in if you have the resources for a specific project, be it HR, be it finance, be it legal. If you go back to the example I did about the business development, had I brought on a hiring coach, I might have been more successful in bringing in the right person at the right time. The idea of taking care of yourself. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot going on. Take care of yourself. In terms of ramp up, maturity. I put insurance review. I do some volunteer CFO work, and I was talking to a small business owner, and we were trying to find a way to reduce his workers' compensation, and we ended up using through his payroll system. But as I talked to him, it became apparent that his company had grown threefold over the last few years. Unfortunately, his workers' compensation hadn't. So not only was there a significant liability out there, there was also a bill that was coming from the insurance company for that unpaid insurance. So again, take a look at is your policies correct? You have the right type of coverage for your business. Is it time for an audit? You're hitting that position. You're looking for an exit. There might be have somebody come in, an audit, compilation, review. But take a look at your books. Make sure that what you think you have, is what you really have. It's rather than being proactive. Rather than having somebody else come in and find it. Contract review. Take a look at your contracts. Take a look at your sales orders. I had a subsidiary company was in the Midwest, and we went out and reviewed their sales. We did a periodic review. One day we took a look at their sales orders, and we sold a bundled software license and maintenance. And on their sales orders, their maintenance had no end date. So all of a sudden, we were selling perpetual maintenance. At the same time, so we had a problem with the maintenance revenue. At the same time, because we were selling a bundled product, all our revenue was impaired. Now, at that time, it was immaterial to the company, but the idea is those 4 or 5 words on a document, could have saved us a significant amount of conversations with the auditors. Same type of thing, expense reviews. Not only, understanding not only where you're spending the money, how you're spending your money, are you spending your money in the right places? Is what you're doing, is there sufficient ROI to justify those dollars that you're spending? And then finally, cash management and forecasting. The idea of understanding, how you're spending your money, where your money's coming from, where you're spending it, and where it's going to come from the future and what you can do with it in the future. So the idea was, again, just sort of a list to fuel your thought on what maybe you could do in 2014. So.
Okay. Well, lastly, we wanted to talk about The Wizard of Oz. Who here has seen The Wizard of Oz? Well, just about everyone. Yeah. The
Judy Garland one.
1939 one. Well, Jill's going to hand out a little handout that's going to talk about lessons learned from the Wizard of Oz on creating business value. And we don't have a lot of time to go, but the unlikely hero in the Wizard of Oz is Dorothy, and the unlikely hero in the business valuation story is the entrepreneur or the intrapreneur. So it's folks, it's the people in this room. You guys are the heroes of the story.
And then the things that are not as they seem, and the line is, we're not in Kansas anymore.
I'm so sorry.
It's important to share.
I know, I'm sorry.
And really what that is thank you. Yeah, is assets minus liabilities, and from the business standpoint, it's assets minus liabilities equals customer value, or company value rather.
Doesn't equal.
Doesn't equal, sorry.
All right. The secret sauce. The secret sauce for Dorothy was the magic ruby slippers. If she took them off, then she would lose her secret sauce. And for the business, it's the things that make your company shine in relation to your competitors.
So, and then persistence. Felt like turning back, but didn't. Creating value takes time, and it's hard work.
Travel with friends. Dorothy and her 3 friends went on the journey. And Toto, that's right. Let's not forget
the
Toto.
dog.
And so it's super important for the entrepreneur to develop a team that it can be trusted and can develop cohesion and develop the right team.
So develop resilience. The scarecrow getting the stuffing put back in when it gets knocked down. Taking care of yourself and your team.
Focus. The focus for Dorothy and her friends was to meet the Wizard of Oz. And with a business, it's to create a value culture.
Transformation. Characters become the things that they thought that they couldn't possess. Take company to the next level.
In terms of vision, Dorothy's vision was to get back to Kansas, and our vision is to create a better world.
Values. There's no place like home. ID these and be true to them.
In terms of leverage, Dorothy got her leverage by sticking together. The leverage in the case of business value creation is your strategic assets.
Value drivers. Dorothy's passion and courage. 1, revenue growth rate plus profits. 3, 1 divided by risk cost of capital drives exponential growth and value.
In terms of risk, who would have thought that a house would have landed on a wicked witch that had ruby slippers? But it was a good outcome, so risk is not necessarily good or bad. So evaluate risks and respond to them in light of opportunities versus trying to eliminate risk.
Improving fortunes. Good witch sends Dorothy home. Rise in company value leads to opportunities for changing the world.
Okay. So as you walk down the yellow brick road, focus on value creation, and eventually you'll reach the Emerald City. That's the lesson.